Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Destiny from Desphixs and welcome back to another video in the e-commerce websites using Django. In this one, we'll basically start off by setting up the projects and pretty much configuring everything that we will be needing to start building the project. That is what we'll be doing. Hopefully you will enjoy the video and learn something new. So let's get started. So the very first thing that we will do will be to install virtual environments and basically start installing all the packages that we will need. And after that, we can start creating a Django project, then start creating apps, installing apps in settings PY. Then we see where it leads us to. The very first thing that we should do is open up your command prompt or terminal if you're on a MacBook. And when you're in here, let me zoom in so that everyone can see what's going on. So the very first thing you should type in here is cd to desktop. So cd to desktop will basically change your directory from user, which is mine, to desktop, which is obviously my desktop here. Now, just to confirm that I am on the desktop, if you hit dir on your keyboard, which is directory, which should list out all the directories that you have in your desktop, because we are now in the desktop folder, you can see that it lists out course, lessons, projects, and every other folder that I have over here on my desktop. So now we can confirm that we are on the desktop. So I'll clear out my terminal by hitting CLS, and let's start off by creating a new folder for those projects. I'm going to say mkdir, then you could call the folder whatever you want, but for this one, or for the case of this tutorial, I'm going to call it fastcart-ecommerce. So the name of this e-commerce that we'll be building was actually named Fastcart by me. Now, what you want to do is get into this Fastcart folder from your terminal. To do that, there are a couple of ways. The first thing you can do is cd into, then you type out the name, Fastcart e-commerce. The other way is to type out cd, give a space, then drag the folder and drop it in here and hit enter on your keyboard. Oh, not this, close this out, just over here, hit enter on your keyboard. Now you can see that we are in that folder. If you hit dir again, you can see that obviously nothing is in here. So clear out your terminal. Now, when this is done, I would highly recommend that we firstly install a virtual environment in here, in this Fastcarts folder, then start installing every other thing that we need. So how do you actually install virtual environments in Python? The very first thing that you need is to make sure that Python is installed on your system. You can type out Python, or if Python doesn't work for you, you could type out Py. Python doesn't really work for me, so I'm going to type out Py. And you can see I have Python 3.11.5. This is a version that I am using right now. If you have a newer version, it's totally okay. It's going to work totally fine. But this is the version that I am using right now, okay? I think I'm gonna upgrade this version as soon as I'm done with this tutorial. So after you have checked and validated that Python is actually here, let's go ahead and create a new virtual environment by running py-m venv, which stands for hey Python, I want to create a new virtual environment. Now Python is going to ask you, okay, what is the name of the virtual environment that you want to create? So over here you could say call it new virtual environment. So this is just the name. This one over here is a command that you need to add to tell Django, sorry, I mean Python, that you want to create a new virtual environment. Then it's going to ask you to also provide a name that it should call the virtual environment. But instead of calling it new virtual env, I want to call it venv, okay? Don't allow this to confuse you, okay? venv is the command that should help you create a new virtual environment. venv is the name. Hit enter on your keyboard and give this, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds or so to actually do its thing and create a new virtual environment for us. All right, you can see that now the virtual environment has been downloaded. The next thing you need to do is activate it. So to activate it, you type out venv/scripts/activate. And whenever you see venv wrapped in a parenthesis at the back of the directory over here, or the directory path or address, then it's successfully downloaded and activated. Now, all you could do is go ahead and start installing whatever package you want in here. And now, you remember that Python keyword wasn't working for me. It was just Py. Now, Python is going to work because I'm now in a virtual environment, which is an isolated environment that has been specifically and specially created for this project. Okay, so after you have done this, you can now go ahead and install Django by running pip install Django, and this will go ahead and install Django for you. But I think my time is up of using the terminal or the command prompt. I will go ahead, clear all this out, then open up this fast cut in my Visual Studio Code. So let's close out the terminal now. And if you open up your Visual Studio Code, this is how it looks. Come over to File, come over to, I think that should be Open Folder here. Then hop over to Desktop, come over to Fast Cut E-commerce, which is this one. Then select Folder. And this should successfully open it up over here. Good. So now I want you to come over to this 3 dots terminal and create a new terminal. So this 3 dots is showing up just because I am zoomed in very well so that everyone can see what's going on. So when you're in here, please do not forget to activate the virtual environment one more time because it's a new environment altogether over here, or rather a new terminal altogether. So now that you have activated the virtual environment, the very first thing that I would highly recommend you do is start installing all the packages that we will be needing. So down here, I want you to create a new file called requirements.txt, and I'm going to paste in a couple of packages that we will be using in here. You can see all these packages. Now, don't worry, I'm going to provide this package for you in the description below. I'll upload it to a GitHub gist or paste bin or maybe a Google Docs sheet. Then I will drop the link for you guys so that you can easily copy this code and paste it down here and continue. And also, if there will be any other code that I will be copying and pasting, maybe for some reason it doesn't really make sense to type it out, I will also leave it in the description so that you can also copy the code and paste it down here easily. All right. So now I hope this is understandable. I hope this is easy. So the next thing I will want to do now is go ahead and install all the packages over here. How do I do that automatically without having to do pip install asgirf, pip install attrs, pip install aws ebcli? So how do I do that automatically and all at the same time? All you need to do is say pip install -r, then call the name of the package requirements.txt, hit enter on your keyboard, then sit back and let it do its thing. All right, welcome back. As you can see over here, the requirements.txt packages has been completely installed. So now let's continue with every other thing that we'll be doing. Now, if you've done this, that means Django has been installed. In this case, Django 4.2, which means we can now create a new Django project by running Django-admin start project. And I will name the project ecom_prj and then give a dot, give a space, then a dot or a full stop before you hit enter on your keyboard. And that is because I want to create all the Django project files here. I want to scaffold all the files over here instead of creating them in a new folder. And when you've done that, that's basically it. That's pretty much it. So now what I will recommend is that we start installing the apps, yeah, and also setting them up in the settings py. So over here, run python manage.py starts app, and we need like 4 or 5 apps. So I'm gonna say user auth and store vendor customer, then I need blog. All right, very good. So when you've done all this, you can now open up your settings py, settings.py. Not this one, my bad. I think that one was in the virtual environment packages. So you can close up the venv, open up the ecom_prj settings py, and just down here in the installed app section, you want to add those apps. So user auth in 5 places, then store, vendor, customer, and blog. So this is a way of telling Django that, hey Django, I have actually installed some new apps that I'll be using for this project. Go ahead and connect them to my projects. So that's an oversimplification of what it does, but hopefully you get the idea. Now, in each of this app, different section of this project will be built in them. So I could as well say, okay, you know what? I'm going to create one app and I'll call the app base or core, and everything ranging from authentication to store related features to vendor dashboard and everything concerning the vendor to customer to blog to the APIs that we'll be using, everything will be built in the core. But when we continue with the project, let's say when we've gotten to like 75% of the project and for some reason there was an issue or a problem, we will find it very difficult to maintain the code and find it very difficult to even fix bugs or to get things, working easily. But when you separate everything to different apps, it will be more easier to pinpoint bugs. It will be more easier to make changes, to overhaul things, and it will be generally easier to maintain the code in the long run. So that is why I highly recommend that you split your application into small sections. For example, the store, the vendor, the customer, the blog, the authentication, all these are in different sections, and then we write each code for each sections in their app. I hope that makes sense. So after you have done this, that's basically it. Some more apps that I will be needing. Okay, for now, let me just add any mail. We won't be sending mail for now, but let me just add that in. So I need any mail, I need captcha, and I need, okay, for now, let me work with only these two. So Anymail and captcha were installed when you installed all the packages in the requirements txt. So you can always refer back to this, and let me show you. This is the captcha, you can see, and also for Anymail, this is Anymail. And that's how we also have all those packages here that we will be making use of. Okay, for example, AWS EBCLI is when we will be hosting to Elastic Beanstalk, and we'll be using this to programmatically, control the Elastic Beanstalk from our terminal. That is if we will be hosting on Elastic Beanstalk. If we will not host there, then we could host on EC2 or Railway or DigitalOcean, anywhere. But this was when I was testing, I used this. So that is why I added it in here for you guys. Okay. And if you're asking, okay, Boto and Boto Core is where we'll start working with storages on S3, on AWS S3. That is where we'll be using these packages, and so on and so forth. All right, so that is pretty much it. Everything seems to be working now. Let me go ahead and run my server and see. Python manage.py, run server, and there you go. We seem to be getting an error. So this error basically is coming from this captcha. Based on the fact that we have installed captcha in this directory or in this installed app section over here, it's gonna require that we add a reCAPTCHA private key and also a reCAPTCHA public key. So for now, I will just comment that line out so that I can be able to run my server and also view it on my browser. So if you can see this page, congratulations, everything is working perfectly well. And yeah, that is it. Let's continue setting up every other thing that we will be needing. So the next thing that we will need will be to configure all the static files, the media files, the templates, and hopefully maybe I'm gonna work with environments variable in a separate video so that you can easily locate it whenever you search for it or whenever you're looking for it. Okay, so let's start off with the templates. I want you to locate the template section here, close off the terminal. You could also close off the sidebar so you have more space, real estate to work with. So over here in the des, we need to join the base directory, which is what we just closed off now. Base directory is this one over here where we have all these files sitting. We need to join it with a new folder that will be called templates, and then tell Django that, hey Django, whenever you are looking for a template that we have specified that you should use, please make sure that you are looking at the base directory, which is here, and please make sure that you are looking at a folder called templates. So that is how to tell Django where to find templates files. But before you do that, at the top, you want to import operating system. So this is what will help us actually work with locations on our system and paths. Okay. So down here in the des, you will say os.paths.join. And I want to join the base directory, which is this place where all those files are sitting, with a new folder that will be called templates. Okay. And joining this with templates means that a new folder templates will have to definitely exist. So you could come over here, create a new folder, and paste it. There you go. So now whenever we specify in our views that we want to use a particular kind of template, Django won't be confused. Django won't be lost. It will know exactly where to go and look for the templates that we have specified that we want to use. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So after we have done that one, that is the first step. The next step would be to we can start configuring media files, right? I was thinking of configuring the contexts apps, the contexts processors, but yeah, let's configure the media files. Then after that, we can configure any other thing that we want. So we have static URL here, and I will also add another one, static roots. Now for static roots, I want to join the base directory with a folder that is going to be called static. So you might be, okay, please hold on. Let me see what's going on. Remove this comma over here. Now that's working. So you might be asking me, come on, Destiny. Initially, when you joined the base directory with a folder called templates, you used os.path.join. But now, why are you just using a square bracket and passing in base there? It's the same thing, guys. So if you want to, you could use os.path.join. If you want to, you could still do it the same way. All right. So instead of having the static URL text here, please change it to static, because that will be a folder that we need to create here. Okay, there you go. So join the base directory with a folder called static. Now, in case you don't know, static files are basically the files that we will be using for our application's overall interface. I think I should use that word. So that means things like the HTML, CSS, not the HTML, but things like the CSS, the JavaScript files, the hero image, the background image, and things like that. You get the idea, are things that are called static files. But media files, which will be what we will start installing next, are pretty much user uploaded file or server uploaded file. So those are the files that will be uploaded from the database, and as soon as they get uploaded, we need a way to be able to locate those files, and we also need a way to store those files. So how do we do that? Now down here, okay guys, I think I missed just one more thing. I want you to duplicate this and change it from static roots to static files des. And you could still leave it this way, but instead of static files, change it to static files. And now you might ask me, okay, that means we need to come over here and create a new folder called static files. Yes, you are not wrong, but I wouldn't recommend that you do that now. This will happen automatically when you run Python manage py collect static for collecting the static files that will be used for production. So this here is kind of like a production-based code that we will be using. But I think I've mixed up something a little bit. That is because the static roots here is the one that should have the static files keyword, okay? But the static files des should be the one that will have the static keyword, okay? So the static files directory is where we will store all the static files that we will be using for production. The static roots is where all the files that we will, okay, I think I actually mixed up my words there. So the static files directory are the ones that will be used for development, but the static roots stores the files that will be used for production. I hope that makes sense. Production, you can still say deployment, okay? So development is different from deployment. The static files directories will be used for development. Static roots will be used for production or deployment. I hope that makes sense. So after you have done this, let's configure media URL. So media URL should be equal to, then we need to pass in media. So let me explain what this does. Now, I don't know if you've worked with any of my video in the past and see how we actually work with media URL. Media URLs will get saved to a folder called media. And if you want to access the files in the media, you have to access them by calling the website address. Let's say website.com/, then there will be a media keyword like this, or a media part, or a media part name like this. So this media part name is different from static. Based on the fact that over here we use static, if you're trying to access the static files, what you will see instead will be static and not media. But for the media, we want to see media. And we are doing this way basically for separation of concern, so that you know that, okay, whenever you want to access a media, media needs to be appended in the URL. Whenever it's going to be a static needs to be appended in the URL. I hope this makes sense. So adding this over here will basically enable us to be able to use the keyword media when trying to access a media file. So whatever you add here is what you will be using in the URL. In case you don't understand, in case all this sound like gibberish for now, don't worry, just chill. I will show you guys how all this works when we start uploading files to the server. Okay, so now that we have done this, we also need the media roots. You could take the static roots, it's almost the same thing. All you just need to do is change from static to media, and instead of static files, just change it to lowercase media. Now, if you want, you could go ahead and create a new folder for the media. If you want, you could still leave that out. But I want you to know that whenever you hear _roots, like static _roots, just know that that is where files will be stored. _theirs, which is _directories. Just know that that is where files will be stored. _URL is pretty much how a file will be represented in the URL. Okay, don't worry, I will better explain this when we start working with files. So after you have done this, for now, that is basically it. There are a lot of things that we can still do, but if I get into those things that we should do now, maybe you might get confused. So I will just leave it at this for now. Okay, so after doing this, I want you to open up the ecomprj URLs py. Now, here is where we will have to perform just a little bits of operations. The first thing that I would want us to do is to actually configure the media URL and the static URL. So the fact that you installed it in your settings.py doesn't really mean that it's going to work right off the bat. You still need to tell Django URLs, okay, Django, when you go over to the settings.py, you will see that there is a file, or you will see that there is a line of code called media roots. That line of code called media roots is where you should actually look for all the media files, and the one called static roots is where you should actually look for all the static files. So that's basically what we want to do now. How do we now do that? Firstly, we need to import a couple of things, and I'm going to start off by saying from Django.settings, import conf. That is the first one. And I think I might have a problem over here. From Django.settings. Okay, my bad. This is from Django.conf. Yeah, I knew something was off. Import settings. I almost forgot that. Then also I need from Django. From Django.conf.urls. Yeah, that's correct. .static. I want to import static. For now, this should be enough for everything that I want to do. Then join URL patterns plus equals static. Then over here, I will say settings.media_URL. So this is us telling Django, hey Django, whenever you need a media file, the media URL that you should use is already stored in the settings py, and take note, it's called settings.media URL. Django will now be like, okay, hold on, let me hop over to the settings and check. So Django is going to come over to the settings and scan through our code. See, it finds media URL, and it will be like, oh yeah, I found it. Okay, it's /media/ all right, I know now. So Django is going to keep track of this one. And also, we also need to tell it where all the media files will be stored, because just accessing the URL doesn't mean anything if the media file, if the actual file itself that it's trying to access does not exist. So we need to tell it where to go and also look for the files. So we now say, hey Django, whenever you're looking for a media file, which is a file that a user have uploaded from their dashboard or wherever onto the server, like a profile picture or a course image or something else, whenever we need to access such file, this is where they are stored. So now we are telling Django that the documents roots for the media files are stored in the settings.media root. So settings.media routes does not mean that that's where it's stored. It means that that is where the configuration of where the media files will be stored. Okay. So if Django will not be like, okay, I didn't actually see that when I scanned through the settings PY. Let me scan through it again. So Django will now come over to the settings PY and they will come over to the media routes here. After scanning the code, they'll be like, oh yeah, I see now. All the files for the media will be stored in the base directory in a folder called media. Okay, now I know where to look for files. Thanks for telling me that. So this is us basically telling Django where to actually go to find things that we will be needing for our application. I hope this makes sense. Then after this one also, we need another one here that will be called static underscore root. So static underscore root is quite explanatory, just like the media root. In case Django needs a way to find the static files that we'll be using for our application, it will quickly hop over to the settings PY, start from the beginning and scan the code till it finds a static root and static URL. Then it will be like, oh yeah, now I know where I'm going to go if I'm looking for files to use for deployment or production, for development or production, or I will know where to go if I'm looking for the URL to use for the static URL. So that is basically what this is. And please do not also forget to change this one to static URL. That is it. That is all done. Now, what next can we actually do? I think we should configure URLs, right? Let's configure the first view. So come over to store, come over to views PY, and I want you to create a new function here called index. And I want you to pass in requests and I want you to return. Then let's import something called from Django.http import HTTP response. So this is just a quick way of logging something onto our site. Instead of showing this defaults, you have successfully installed Django. Congratulations. So what we are trying to do now is create a new function that will override this page. And instead of showing just this default welcome page that, yeah, it looks good, but won't really give us the opportunity to do what we want to show our own custom page. So then what we did was create a new function. This is how you define functions in Python. You define using the keyword def, then you call the name of the function. In this case, it's index. Now, just so you know, you can call a function whatever you want. You could say, okay, you know what, I'm going to call this function Uncle Bobby. Or you say, you know what, I'm going to call this function milkshake. Now, it's up to you what you want to call this function. But, you know, just to stick to naming convention and to make our code easier to read by other developers that we might work with in the future, it's highly, I say that 3 times. It's highly recommended that you actually use reasonable names that are not just Uncle Bobby. Yeah. So we could say index in this case, which means this function will be the function that is going to serve our very first page. So that is why we call it index. Now, if you don't want to call it index, you can still call it home. You can still call it base. You can still call it core. All these are still names that's, yeah, they stick to convention. Well, based on the fact that the name of the template that we'll be using for the very first one will be called index, I will highly recommend that you stick to calling this index. Okay. So I'm going to return HTTP response and call the HTTP response like this using a parenthesis. And in here, I'm going to open 2 double quotes or single quotes. Anyone is going to work. And I want to say hello world. And now this is the code, or this is the text I want to show over here instead of all this. So what do we do? Now, the very first thing is that if you even get back here and reload, I hope my server is still running. Let me check if my server is still running. So I'm going to open up my terminal and I'm going to run py manage.py run server. Okay, there seems to be an issue. os.parts seems to have an issue. It's actually nice that we figured this out now. Let's see what's going on. Then I will continue my explanation from here. So let's see what's going on. os.parts.join. Okay, looking at the error down here, I think it's trying to tell me that there is a mistake with one of the static configurations here. So if you're looking at the static root and the static theirs, you can see that one is in the list, which is the static file theirs, which is this one is in the list. One is not supposed to be in a list. So the static root is not supposed to be in a list. This error actually reminded me of something that I have missed to explain for you guys. Now, in case you initially asked, okay, Destiny, what are the differences between these two? Since we had static URL, static roots, then we had media URL, media roots, and then we now had static files there. How about, why don't we have media file there? So what are the differences between these two? Now, just so you know, the static roots basically defines the roots directory where Django will collect static files during the collect static management command. Remember when I told you that whenever we run Python manage py, collect static, that is where Django will actually store all the files that it has collected from the static. So it's basically the roots directory where Django will collect the static files too whenever we run the collect static management command, which is py manage py collect static. And this also will be the final destination for static files after they have been gathered from different places. So in case you don't understand, whenever you run the collect static command, what Django does is not only collects the static files that we used in our projects, like the JavaScript and the CSS. No, it will still hop into the admin. It will grab all the CSS and all the JavaScripts and every other file that was used for the admin. It will hop over to each and every one of the packages that we installed, like the CK editor, which other one, like Jasmine here. And it will grab all the CSS and JavaScript files that were used for those packages and store all of them in one place. And why this is interesting is because this will ensure that the static files are served efficiently and avoid potential conflicts when deploying our project to a server like Railway or AWS. Now, this one over here is actually quite explanatory. Now, this is basically the one that tells Django, hey Django, for any reason, if you don't find a particular static file that we are looking for, still try and look for it in this folder. Now, this folder is where we will then go ahead and store the simple static files that we'll be using for our projects instead of the overall static files that Django will get when we are ready to actually make, to actually deploy and also make the collect static commands. So to finally answer the question of why is one in a list or a square bracket and why is one isn't. Now, this is the answer to it. This one over here is where Django is going to store all the static files that we will use for the project and even for production and development. Now, this one over here is where Django will look for again in case there are static files that are missing. And it's in the list simply because if for any reason Django didn't find it here, and for some other reason, you specified that, hey Django, there is still another place that is called static new. Now, if Django didn't find it here in the static folder, Django will hop over to the next item in the list and also look for it here, so on, till it finds the static file that you're looking for. So the list here basically means that we can add multiple paths where Django can look for static files here. This one is just one source of truth where Django does not need to look for static files in another place. Once it doesn't find it in there, it forgets about it in production. That means it doesn't exist. But this one over here, when we run the collect static file, Django is going to go through all the static files in the project alongside with the static files in here, gather everything and store it in here. I hope this clears things up a bit for you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this one. For now, I will be using only the static folder here to store static files. Good. So let me see, run my server one more time. There you go. It's working now. So open this up on my browser and see page not found. So why is it not showing this page anymore? But now it's showing page not found. That is because we have defined a new function, but we haven't told this home page over here how to actually get that function and display it. How do we do that? So I want you to firstly come over to ecomprj and you will see a file called urls.py. Open that up And just down here, I want you, okay, before that, import include, there you go. And down here, for now, we won't be using include. Actually, we could have left that out. I want to show you guys the easier way first, then I'll show you the difficult way, but which is more professional than the easier way. That's why I imported include, but don't worry, I will leave that out for now. So let's firstly do this the easier way. What I want to import instead of include was supposed to be from store imports, rather from store.views import index. That's what I was supposed to import. Then over here, I'm supposed to say part, then leave an empty string like that, then pass in index over here. Very good. So now this outrightly tells Django, hey Django, as soon as a user visits the home page, which is the page without any parts or any parameter or any link again, we want you to immediately serve anything that is displayed on the index, in this case hello world. So what do you think is going to happen when we reload this page? There you go, hello world. So that is why we are now able to see the hello world over there. And you might be asking, okay Destiny, but why did we leave this empty but this one isn't empty? Now this one isn't empty basically because if you want to visit the admin, that is where you have to go to see the admin. But don't worry, we are still getting an error now. We haven't migrated, okay? But that's where you need to go to see the admin. But if you remove everything and come to the home page, you see the hello world. To better explain this, you could even come over here and say, okay, you know what? Whenever I want to see the hello world, I want to come over to Uncle Bobby. So whenever you come over to Uncle Bobby / that is when you want to see the home page. So let's go ahead, come over here and say, hey, go over to Uncle Bobby. And there you go. See, hello world still shows up. But how about we remove Uncle Bobby and just stick with the home page? Now, there you go. See, page isn't found anymore. So hopefully you get the idea. And in fact, you could even nest this. You could say, whenever I come over to Uncle Bobby is nice. So whenever I come over to this URL like this, that is when I want to see the page. Then you firstly come over to Uncle Bobby, reloaded your page. Whoops, nothing is showing. Then you added Uncle Bobby is nice. Then now you can see hello world. So all this Uncle Bobby is nice keywords are just for explanation purposes, so you understand. In a real world scenario, it would be like store/cart. Okay, so it would be something like that looks like this, store/cart, which means over here you need to visit store/cart to see welcome to my cart, but in this case hello world. I hope this clears it out a bit. Now, just so you know, this is an oversimplification of working with URLs. In the future, we will have a lot of URLs. We will have over 50, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 50 URLs. Now, you wouldn't want all your URLs to be littered everywhere here and looking like this. Let me show you. So you wouldn't want your URLs looking like this everywhere. And before you find one, you need to scroll all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom before you find one. Nah, that doesn't really make sense to me. So what I would highly recommend that we do is we actually create this URLs somewhere else and inherit it into this place. So we will keep this place tidy and basically separate consents to different apps. So whenever you come over to the store app, we want it to have its own URLs called urls.py. And in here, that's where we'll go ahead and perform most of the operations that we are performing here already, but maybe lighter. So I want you to import from Django.urls, import parts, and I also want you to add app name should be equal to, then add the name of the app. So this here is basically for namespacing. Now, due to the fact that we will have a lot of apps, or that we already have a lot of apps, store, customer, vendor, and all that, we actually need a way to make sure that we don't confuse the URLs. So don't worry, you will better understand this when we get to that section. I will explain it more, but let me oversimplify it now. So this is a way that you use to actually target URLs from apps to their particular naming. So let's say over here, there is a URL called cart. There is another URL called checkout. There's another URL called payment success. And let's also say that in the vendor dashboard, there's a URL called orders and there's a URL called order detail. And let's also say that in the customer dashboard, there's a URL called orders and there's a URL called order detail. Now, this is when this name spacing over here comes to actually work, or rather this app naming comes to work. So what it will do is, over here, you can't really differentiate which is which from this one and this one, except if you manually say, hey, this is for the vendor orders and this is for the vendor order detail. But what if you don't want to do that? You want the names to be clean like this without having any vendor keyword or customer keyword appended to them. In that case, you need to use the app name to identify each URL. So based on the fact that this one is called store, or let's even say that this one was called vendor, for you to identify the vendor, you have to put this over here and put a colon. So this is how we will know, oh yeah, this one is for the vendor and this one is for the customer. So whatever is here is what you need to add over here as the naming. In case this doesn't make sense, please don't worry yourself about this, okay? If you don't understand, it's totally fine. It's totally okay. Don't worry yourself about it. I'll better explain this later. So I want you to create a new list and call the list URL patterns. Nothing too complex, just like an array, but called list in Python. It's called URL patterns, and we set it to this empty list. Open that up, and now we want to start off by installing exactly the same thing that we did over here, but instead for here. So what do? Firstly, go ahead and import index. Say from store, import views. Now this is another way of doing it rather than what we did over here. Remember over here, we said from store.views import index. But here, I want to say from store import views. Then down here, I'm going to create a new path using this path that I imported. And remember that when you leave it as empty string, it goes to the home page. Then I'm going to pass in views dot. Then what did we even call the name of that app in the index, in the view? I think I've forgotten. Well, I just mentioned it. It's called index. So I'm going to put this down here, index. And one of the most important things that we could do here is add a name to this. I'm going to call it index. Now, if I explain this again, it might get complicated for you, but don't worry, just put in this name index. As soon as we use it, you will be like, oh, so that's what it does. Then you will easily understand what's going on. Okay. So with all this now, that is basically what we want to do for the URLs. Come over to the main URLs. And you will also hear me say things like main URLs throughout this project. Whenever you hear main URLs, just know that it's like the URL where your settings PY is right above it. Okay. So I want you to remove this one. I'm also remove this one. And now we're going to make use of this include. So here I will say parts, and I'm going to leave it as an empty string over there. Okay, right now I'm using double quotes and single quotes, which doesn't really stick to convention. So I'm going to turn this back to single quotes. And then I want to say include. Now, this is quite different from what we've been doing with the parts. We need to include then in a quote store.urls. So what this will do is, as soon as we try reloading our page, it will immediately hit this line over here and it's to say, oh, come on, there are no URLs over here. Then as soon as it gets here, it will be like, okay, hold on. I think the developer was trying to include something, and then when it gets here, it will be like, okay, I should hop over to the store. Then it will come over to the store, and then it will locate URLs, which is this one here. It will open it up and say, oh, there you go. Here is the URL that was supposed to be here, but now it's here. So now what it will do is it will take this and then run the code for you on your browser using everything over here. So let me break out from my server, run it again, and let's test this. So we come over here, we reload. This shouldn't work, but when we get to the home page and reload, there you go. Hello world. Perfectly well. So guys, I think that is pretty much it for the project setup. Everything is working perfectly well as expected. In the next video, we should start working with templates, or maybe admin, or maybe template inheritance. I don't know, but let's see how it goes. And yeah, that's gonna be it. In the next video, we'll start working with admin, so that I will show you guys how the admin work, how migrations and migrates work, how super users work, and all that. That is it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If there is something that you think I missed that I didn't explain, let me know in the comment section and I will explain it in the next video. Okay. And also I would highly recommend that you drop your feature ideas in the description below, as that will help us make this project the perfect e-commerce that there is out there. That is it. If you're looking to get the source code, please check out the links in the description below. The first one over there should help you get the link. And if in case you don't know how to get the source code, I've made a video in the demo video. So it's actually a pretty long video, but I've added timestamps so that you could, if you want to watch the demo, you could quickly hop over to the demo. If you're interested in the source code installation, you can hop over to the source code installation, download the source code, and in the next one we will get started with the templates. And in case you got a source code and you don't know how to install it, there is also a video in the demo video that I made that will help you install the source code and set it up and running, so that you don't have problems setting it up by yourself. That is going to be it. I hope to see you in the next video. And until then, much love. Peace out.